Okay, go into LinkedIn. And I always do that. We're live, folks. And then kick it off. So it's an activity. Okay. Okay. And then. Okay. So we have about, let's say, 3 people. People who drop in, drop out. They might have questions at the end, they might not. And then if so, I'll always send questions over if I get them afterward.
Yeah, no
So I'll
problem.
just a quick intro, and then we'll kick it off. And just to make sure, I should ask before, but it's okay. Alex or Alessandro?
If you can, Alessandro. Otherwise, I may. Who are they calling? But no, I'm joking.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Alessandro.
Anyway.
Okay, that's fine. And then Marianatoni.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good pronunciation. Yeah.
Marianatoni. Okay, making sure. All right, wonderful. Okay, so I'll do the quick intro. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Accelerator Insider, where we explore the minds behind accelerators, incubators, and venture studios. We interview innovation leaders to learn how they build businesses for today and the future. And I'm really excited to have another Los Angeles person here on the call today, Alessandro Martoni, director of Accelerator. So thank you so much, Alessandro, for joining us today.
Thank you, Dominique, and thanks everybody for listening and joining this morning.
Yes, for sure. And so first, just want to start with like something very simple.
Yeah.
The M. So it's M Accelerator. What does the M stand for?
Yeah, that's a good question, and yeah, but it's very simple. Several years ago, when I thought about the name of what I was building, I just follow what it was kind of a trend in those years, like when it was 2017, 2018. So larger companies were coming up with their own accelerators, and they were just picking their own bigger name, like Disney. They were like D and then Accelerator, and I had done the same just because of I didn't want to waste any time in finding a name, and I'm really picky with a lot of things. So I said, okay, let's go for an easy choice. So M stands for Meteors, which is my first company here in the US. And actually has the same company of a no-profit organization that I run in Italy, but it stands for Meteors. So the full name is Meteors Accelerator.
And what does Meteors, because Mediars,
Yes.
what does that stand for?
So Meteors, when I built this nonprofit in Italy, it was interact. It's a research. It's an experimental center for interactive media, performance, and the arts. And it's strongly connected to culture and technology and the local ecosystem. We decided to do a project, for example. So and then after many years, I almost forgot the full extended name, and I just called it Mediars, which is this mix between media and ars from Latin.
Do you think does that show up in the current accelerator today? Is that like a red thread, or really just more of just a connection at the time?
Yeah, it's definitely there. It's our approach, essentially. It's our, if I may, it's our cultural approach. So many years ago, when I started working with the nonprofit in Italy, we were picking. We came up with this format, very short workshops, which today I may call them, now with the experience that I have now, I may call those experiments very short accelerator programs. And they were only for 2 weeks. And we were calling people from pretty much everywhere. At the beginning, I remember they were primarily probably students from UCLA, but then it became pretty much participants from everywhere, from even China, Singapore, South Korea, Europe. And for me, it was an opportunity to spend a few more weeks back home in Italy during my summer, because I was the whole year here. And then I said, let's come up with an Italian project. And in those 2 weeks, we were going in small, mid-sized towns in Italy, discovering and learning about the local culture and the local economy. And then the participants of the students of these workshops were creating pretty much what I would call a creative work. And every year was a different framework. We did video production, we did interactive installations, we did video projections, and we did even a larger project with Google at the Coliseum. So very multimedia projects, but everything in 2 weeks. And then at the end, the last day, there was even a public presentation. So we were showing the results. And usually the results, when you're building something like an interactive installation, it's something that has to work, something that required some coding software, some electronics. So it was 2 weeks, very intense. And we were showing a new concept of, a media work with a lot of technology often.
Wow. And so for the accelerator,
so the combination between the definitely an artistic approach, but there's a lot of design, a lot of let's say local identity, local culture, and local economy, plus technology.
And are you seeing that show up in your participants of your program, that they have a similar ethos or belief, or is it really just a widespread of companies who are looking for support?
But those programs, which right now I'm not running, the ones in Italy, definitely had an audience that was interested in multidisciplinary projects. And to be a founder, you have to be a little bit like that. You have to have a lot of empathy. You have to really understand something that you really deeply care about it, like the problems that these founders are solving. And then, of course, you have to have a lot of other skills. And in terms of, for example, building a team around a concept, a problem you want to solve, start building a solution, right? And start communicating your idea. And these are just to start the first 3 elements. And if you're interested in if you're a designer interested in multimedia concepts and projects, it's more likely that you have also a diverse background, and you're really aligned with a founder of an accelerator, I would say.
And so if you look about your career, because you've done a lot of different things actually, and it's interesting because you did this. Your career has built an intersection of design and technology, and that probably has always existed in tech, though we haven't really honored it so much in the tech industry. Whereas now with AI, you're seeing these big installations at the MoMA that are like art and tech, and it's very clear, and you know that. So can you just talk to me a little bit about, back then, how did you go from one to the other? I saw that you were a computer science undergrad and then grad, and then you went to design. So did you always know you were trying to intersect the two, or like, how did that come about?
I grew up in a very naive and I don't know, uncontrolled is the word that comes out way. So, but fortunately, I had a very strong passion on something. I had very strong passion in building technology. And my first computer, I don't know, fourth grade, I built it out of paper just because I was so much in love with the Mac that I've seen, one of the first Macintosh that I've seen in one of the offices in the building where I used to live in Rome. And I'm from a small town called Rieti, but I also spent a few years in Rome. And so I had this strong passion, and I started learning how to code out of an instruction book with the Commodore 64. So I believe I have a strong background, technical background because of that. And by the time I went to high school, I knew what I wanted to study. University is the same. But I always, with a very naive approach, had some, ideas about building something with a lot of design, building something that I was, for example, many in the late 80s, early 90s, I mean, nobody was talking about building a user-friendly UI, user interface, right? So I had those concepts, and also, in Italy, growing up in a small town, you really don't have a lot of opportunities to read about the names that are, later started to become way more popular internationally. And so, yeah, it wasn't easy, but if I was guided by this very pure passion about building technology. And so my background is pretty technical, but somehow when I ended up, by the time I moved here, I already had a lot of projects. I was running a software house that then became a web agency in my hometown. And at that time, in the mid 90s, wasn't really difficult to find clients in mid-sized towns in Italy, right? Actually, I was working for the government. I was working for insurance companies and other many companies over there. And by the time I came here, I discovered that here actually technology was not just a solution, but also was more like a tool, was more like something that could be used to work with culture. There was a lot of culture about tech in California, right? Coming from previous decades. So and I've seen a lot of interactive art. And then I said, oh, this is interesting. Here, it's actually a job. It's not just something that you do on your spare time. And then probably because of my ability of coding and developing and my passion into that, I entered the academic environment. Something that in Italy I never thought about it. But here I was really entrepreneurial, I would say, way more than Italy, even in the academia. At the end of the day, I learned, I applied what I was doing in Italy here, which is you go out, you see a problem, you start, you do grant proposals, or you start talking to corporations and you pitch your ideas. Eventually, you solve their problems, but you also get some funding to run your research. And that's how I see it. That's why I'm saying it's more like entrepreneurial academia here. And then I took a couple of break pauses to work on startup projects, but then I came back, and in total I was USC, like I was a visiting scholar only for 6 months, but then I did 10 years at UCLA in two moments.
Well, and I saw that. So you were a senior researcher for the National Science Foundation. So when you're referencing like the grants and kind of your own research, was that kind of the merger of kind of your interests with something that was kind of burgeoning at the time? I mean, the topic was interesting. It was like future internet program, building automation and cyber physical systems. And I was like, what? And that was, from a decade ago. So I'd love to know, like, first, let's start with what was that? What was that about?
What was that about? Right. So that was probably one of the largest projects I was involved in my years at UCLA. And it was our director, Jeff Burke, remap inside the School of Theater, Film and Television. That's where I spent the 10 years, which is a joint research center with the School of Engineering, UCLA. And the project there, it's actually, we got awarded to be one of the 4 NSF projects to build the future, I would say, internet protocol of the future. Just because the internet protocol nowadays, I'm not going to go into the details, but it's not really optimized for the use that we are doing. 50 years ago, it was designed to do slightly different things, right? So we need to optimize that. And our very large team. I mean, at the end, it was a group of including 10 campuses, and we also built test beds, tests
Yeah.
with the European partners. So it was a very large project, and it was about designing and building and deploying a possible alternative to what today is called TCP/IP for
Mm-hmm.
which is the Internet Protocol. So, and in my specific work, I was working on it. It's 10 years ago, right? But in my specific work, I was running a couple of use cases, and interactive lighting, video streaming, and especially my field was building management system. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, now that I'm mentioning that, I remember that this is my second experience at UCLA, and I came back bringing with me the results of a startup project that I've done probably between 2008, 2009 and 2011. And then just after that, I came back at UCLA. We built it was called a Canary indicators. So these canary indicators were like communicating energy consumptions in buildings through colors and lights. So interactive things to be exhibiting into the main hall of the buildings to spread awareness through visualizations to the visitors of the building or the occupants of the building. Think about a commercial building or building with a lot of offices, right? And I have to say that at that time, even though it sounds awkward, it was too early. It was too early to start talking about clean tech, or energy consumptions, and all of that. We struggled a lot to find the right audience. Then we actually we took a shortcut and we sold. We got commissioned a prototype, and then we sold the project. And then I brought that experience back in the research, which sounds awkward because usually you do the opposite. But this time, that's how it worked out, and that's why I ended up working on building management systems again in the research environment.
Well, do you see a lot of the lineage of your work from there kind of showing up in the world today in terms of some of the ideas or projects
So
you're looking for?
you may have you may remember, or you may know, you may have it at home. Nest. This was Google. Google bought it for several billions of dollars, and they brought it to the market in around 2011. So like several years after we thought about a similar idea. This technology is already around now. It's not exactly the same one, but yes, we have it in our homes. And there's more talking about, today we are more aware of the energy that our buildings are consuming, for example, because of things that we measure. Specifically to the research I was doing at UCLA, not too long ago, my former director, Jeff, told me that the NDN, which is the name data networking project, is actually deployed in a large corporations here in California as a solution to measure and optimize their it's a clean technology in California. So that it's the level of proof of concept, I would say, and even probably a little bit more. I don't know the details of this deploy, but it's definitely, if a corporation is using it, it's definitely in the market. And it's a deep, in the startup ecosystem, you will call it a deep tech approach. So it takes really years before the technology is ready to enter the market. But yes, it's slowly is getting there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think folks don't realize that things.
And I'm saying slowly because today, what we read on the news, it's primarily about software startups, right? We're reading about AI, we're reading about no-code tools. So we're building apps in days, right? Things like that. So, and instead, if you're looking at the other technologies, there are still some great solutions that took decades to be built. Think about quantum computing. It's been like 30, 40 years that we're talking about that. I studied computer. I did a first software with AI, artificial intelligence. At that time, I was calling it neural networks.
Yeah.
Back in when it was 1999,
Yeah.
forecasting the stock market with
Yeah.
a specific kind of neural network. So as being like also 50 years, almost 50 years of AI now, but only now is coming to fruition in the magnitude that we all are becoming aware of.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on. I think it's folks don't realize like the gestation period of building kind of the rails of the future is kind of how I think about it. Really what those components are. And so I think a lot of folks are, building on the layer 1 and 2, right, on top of those core technologies. And then when you get to that consumer layer, you see this huge kind of,
Yeah.
ecosystem that comes up. It's like, oh yeah, everyone's now doing generative AI. You're like, well, it actually has been around for a very long time, but I guess now everyone can participate. And so now
Yeah,
it
and
becomes,
in this specific, and also thanks to OpenAI, right? It's debatable, but thanks to them, now pretty much all the world that uses internet today is kind of aware of the not aware, but they have an understanding. They can use the word for sure. Now everybody knows that on internet that generative AI can write, and it seems even smarter than than someone, but
well,
it's
yeah, I mean,
it's
even in the climate I guess, so this is a good question for you, I think, because you've done both and you seem very oriented toward kind of important things for culture and community. You did a lot of stuff in climate. Um, what do you think is the bigger pressing item? Do you think it's the AI and the technology singularity, the privacy and all that, or do you think climate is the harder challenge to solve for? Both are pretty challenging problems.
yeah, and it's interesting the way we are articulating these questions, right? Because AI per se is not really a problem. It's the way we're right, the way we are using it. Then I believe that governance is going to be the next thing that we have to address with AI by itself. Then, of course, if we're talking about climate tech and clean tech, over there, the words well define a specific problem, right? I think that AI as a tool could be definitely very useful to work and solve problems, right, for related to climate tech and clean tech. Scientists are saying that it's kind of late already, but I think that there's no other options. I mean, we have to really focus and look at these problems. In growing up, I mean, school, and I don't know, maybe because I'm getting old, but I go back and I think when I went to my elementary and middle school, but we always had these projects about saving the planet, about pollution, about and we were not, of course, calling it clean tech, but it's interesting from my point of view now because I'm running the accelerator and I'm in touch with a lot of governments internationally, and of course I talk to a lot of founders that finally even at the government levels they are deciding to allocate budgets and to promote initiatives. Actually, Accelerator. I didn't want to steer the conversation there, but Accelerator just got awarded to run the clean tech innovation desk for the Italian government here in the West Coast. So it's so strong, right? So that also government are becoming aware and are putting resources down to, let's say, facilitate and orchestrate some, let's say, general directions for startups and create guidelines and structural approaches so that even startups they need a lot of help. They have guidelines to succeed in their scopes.
Yeah. No, I mean, actually, we can talk a little bit too about the program because the program does many things. You have a couple of different programs. And, maybe the first question here is, how did you come to the decision for the programs that you actually have? Because you have workshops and then you have a startup accelerator and you have founder program. So how did you end up with like this particular kit of solutions for the accelerator?
Yeah, it's one step. I did one step at a time, I guess. Actually, at the beginning, a friend of mine told me, "Oh, Alessandro, you do all of these projects, right? Like we were talking about before. Primarily, it was in the entertainment event industry, I would say, theme parks, installations, and stuff like that. And these are all in some industry. These are called special projects. And I liked the work because I could say, "What are you doing? I'm doing a special project, right?" But it's just because it's just
A one-off, yeah.
what is that? I'm doing it twice a year because that's what but special just because they are not under any department, right? Because they are multidisciplinary. So you talk to the marketing, you talk to tech, engineering stuff, you talk to the also the whatever what it was, HR. Sometimes it depends on the project. So you work with so many different departments inside a company to build one of those installations. And at the end, I started doing a course, a program to teach others to do these projects. And I did that for 1.5 years. And then I started seeing that we had founders of startups coming in. This was before around 2015, 2016. And then I noticed founders coming in and said, "I mean, do you have a project you're building?" "No, we're a company building this technology." I said, "Okay, yeah." It made sense right away because essentially that's what we were teaching them. We were teaching them how to communicate their problems, how to put together a pitch to get the funding for the project, and even sometimes tech advising. And then once basically in 1 year time, it became an accelerator. It wasn't anymore a program. So, and essentially in every step we made, the accelerator came because the audience we were talking to was requiring some additional elements. So that's how we built so many programs, I would say. Now we have for example, we call it founders cohorts. It's a program for companies and founders at the pre-product market fit, which it's a very large, broad, bucket. But essentially, as soon as you have a decent idea of what is that you want to do, and you are putting together your pitch deck, so you're trying to communicate your concept, you're trying to understand who's your customer, you're trying to build also an MVP. So this is the program that we offer to the founders. It's very early stage, of course. It's a membership on our platform. And I like it because there's a lot of founders, very diverse in ethnicity, culture, but also in the scope of their projects. And for us, helping founders at that stage, it's kind of not a lot of effort in the sense that, for example, we have a very clear structure for the way they should build a pitch deck. And we have worked with thousands of founders. So after that experience, we work with also many investors. So we know we're investors ourselves. So we know how to bridge the gap between when an idea comes in, a concept that is not well formed, well shaped. We know what it needs to look like when it's going to be ready. So we have a coaching approach, which is our unique our unique value proposition, how we are different from other accelerators, and we are helping and guiding founders with the clarity that they need, and so that together with them, we find that we help them essentially shape a more clear business concept, more clear business strategy, marketing strategy, and also the execution part of it. So this is one of the programs. Then we have other programs for seed and pre-seed stage, which are companies past the product market fit, initial product market fit. So which means that they're already talking to customers, they're acquiring some customers, for example. But it's hard to describe this program. In fact, I do a monthly webinar, because then if I say we need customers to do seed and pre-seed program, then somebody tells me, "Oh yeah, but we've been working on this tech for 3 years," and so I realized that it's a different startup. It's a deep tech approach. Of course, they don't have customers, so so we have to articulate it in a different way. But yeah, we also work with growth later stage companies.
Mhm.
Often it's because of their go-to-market strategy. They're really
Mhm.
pretty good and pretty successful in their own as a startup in their own
Mhm.
country, for example, or in their own market, and they are ready to make a leap and either come to the US or maybe go somewhere else. And
Mhm.
we help them. We help them with a growth strategy
Mhm.
or with improving their pitch deck. It's amazing. I mean, I would never guessed, but founders, they always need help with their pitch decks, even if they are a B, D, C pre-IPO stage. And it's
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's so much to dig in there because I mean, for the sure on the pitch, because I think what folks don't always realize about the pitch deck is that the pitch deck is the process that a founder can use if they understand that to clarify their thinking about the business model, right, and their approach to the business. And so much of when you are investing in a company, folks think, oh, I have the pitch. It's like, well, actually, when you get to the later stages, you're just having a conversation. The deck is like a reference tool. It's not really the thing, but it's supposed to reflect that you have, clarity of thought, right? And I think founders don't really understand that that's the intention. It's like it's a tool to build clarity, which I think um, would help many folks, I think, across really the world who are startup founder trying to go into other markets. Kind of, if they understand that fundamentally,
yeah.
then it changes. Versus like, what is the pitch deck? What do they want to see? It's like, no. What are you trying to tell people? What's your logic model around the business that you're trying to at this moment of inflection that you're trying to create? So I think that's sort of, and so with that being said, though, how much of the work that you're doing with founders right now is a lot of like market entry, like they're trying to get into the US market, but they don't understand the US market and they're wanting to kind of align themselves to that culture.
Yeah, that's so yes, since 2020 we're definitely online because in a way we were forced, but we also I was also planning to go online and work with more internationally.
Mhm.
And so since 2020, 2021, we had definitely have more companies of that kind. So
Mhm.
companies that are interested in opening or expanding their presence in the US. And the cultural aspect is definitely fundamental. And it's not everything you said before. It's actually a great fit for this one because in many countries may have different ways of presenting information, or they are accustomed to certain styles or formalities.
Mhm.
And instead, let's say that definitely California allows us to be a little bit more casual with the tone, with the right. If I definitely, everything is relative, right? We have to compare the way we act and we do business here to the way other people do in other countries, right? I'm not saying that we are not formal. We are formal,
Mhm.
but compared to other countries, there are stringent formalities and we
Yeah.
are requirements that has to be addressed. And those requirements sometimes force you to pitch for 1 hour. It doesn't make any sense, right? But it's still, in many countries, they do that. And when they come here, we have to explain that if you pitch for 1 hour somebody, I mean, it's gonna
Mhm.
make no sense. So there is a way of delivering information that is fortunately we have references, right? So storytelling has been working for how long? 10, 20,000 years, right?
Mhm.
So we can pick some elements from this field and put it into the way we are communicating and information essentially. So here now, this year, but also last year, a demo day, a pitch day, you have companies pitching for 3 minutes. And we know that there is also the elevator pitch, right? It's less than 1 minute or less. But I would say that 3 minutes is becoming really typical. And then we have the 5 minutes format. And these are very short times for
Mhm.
short interval of times
Yeah.
for many of the startups we work with. They're trying to enter the US. So we so just to reorganize the narrative from 1 hour into 3 minutes, it's a decent work.
So I mean, that's a serious activity. I mean, that's a serious activity.
Yeah,
That's incredibly challenging. I mean, I mean, and I think for folks like you and other folks who do this kind of work, I mean, so I always, what they say, entrepreneurship or business, it's art and science, right? And I think um, we sometimes get caught up in the science, which is important because there's a lot of tools that you can kind of use to say, here's the structure for how to do things. But when you understand the art, right, the art of storytelling, then it becomes much simpler to go, oh, right, if this is the goal of storytelling, then this is what I want to get across. And then I can then take that and drill it down. But if I think I'm going to shove this into a structure, it's a much harder process, right? You have to kind of do it from the other side, in a sense.
yeah, and but at the end of the day, I mean, everything makes sense. This approach really makes sense. If you start your work by understanding the audience you're talking to,
Yeah.
everything else comes very natural, and it's a skill that you have to train, and the skill is to be empathetic about
Yeah.
somebody, which means understanding the reactions. Are they following what I'm saying? Are they getting bored? Is it something that interests them? Am I using too technical words over here? I'm spending too much time on these diagrams that takes
Yeah.
long to be understood. So it's really about, of course, understanding the values of your business, but also really deeply understanding who you're talking to. And if you are able to be both, to develop both kind of empathies, and then that's how you're successfully communicating your ideas. There are so many ideas. I mean, so many interesting concepts, interesting solutions, but communicating it's a very difficult task. And sometimes I would say that language, you studied this, I guess, language is not the way we are talking, it's also many other things. So it's really about that design process of the iteration process, I mean, where you go through and you try to refine your concept, your ideas, and then also the way you're talking about it. It's all interlocked. It's all part of the same mechanism, and that's what gets me really excited. It's not just the business aspect of it. It's studying humans.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, so and I have a quick caveat question here just for the program because you did mention a whole bunch of different things. And so just it's a platform. So and I know you said you also work with governments. So is it a paid platform? Everyone pays to participate, or do you have like a spread of stuff where some things are like subscription, some things are one-off, some things are free, and they're like, or some things are equity, like because you have a couple of different programs, and I know you're also an investor now as well.
Yeah. Yes. So the for example, the program I mentioned before for pre-product market fit, so very
Mhm.
very early stage, the easiest way I put it together is a membership. So there is a fee that sometimes gets discounted, but there's a fee, a monthly fee, and
Mhm.
founders joined our platform paying the monthly fee.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't offer it in this way unless I was really sure that the value we're offering is much
Sure.
more than the fee we're asking. So when they join the platform, it means that they have access to all of our material that is recorded. So it's
Mhm.
more than I didn't count it anymore, but it's definitely more than 100 hours of sessions recorded
Mhm.
with mentors, investors, and more. They have access to our programs that are recorded and live. There are teaching and coaching about how to put together the pitch deck,
Mhm.
how to build an investor funnel, how to talk to investors, the different stages of an interview, how to build your value. So everything that a founder will need to know if they're building a deck, which is
Mhm.
basically your business model.
Yeah.
And so that's something and then we have even $1 million perks out of our partners,
Mhm.
CRMs, and cloud computing and all of that for the founders. And then we do have other accelerator programs that are more like intense. So for
Mhm.
example, our seed that proceed is 60 hours of coaching in 8 weeks, which
Mhm.
means it's about, I don't remember, 8 hours a week of
Yeah.
coaching, which
Right.
is a lot of hours, right? So we can only work with the certain founders that have the time, that understand what is that we want to work on with them, and often they have to understand that this is a process. This is a development process. If they don't see them, let's say they visualized what is the next stage for their startup, it's also about what is their next stage, almost personally, right? So if they don't see this one as a sort of a learning experience, it's hard to work with them, right? So if somebody comes and already know everything, they don't need us, right? But it's not about knowledge, right? That's why the coaching, and then these programs see them precede and growth stage could be out of a fee, very simple fee, or it could be equity. So we are open to negotiate that with the founders, and then we do a lots of to be sustainable. We do a lots of programs with governments. Equity fund. So essentially, for the investors, we do an accelerator program that it's de-risking the investment, which is essentially helping the startups in improving their value proposition, making sure that everything is it's a sort of a due diligence, but for like an accelerator program, and it helps the investors to decide who to invest in. And these are paid by the VCs, right?
Yeah.
These programs are paid by the VCs. And then we have the programs paid by the governments or other public offices that are, government offices that they are typical accelerator programs, but our programs, right? Our approach. So it's typically between 6 weeks and 12 weeks, depends on the requirements. And we essentially do pretty much the same things. Then we have to customize it based on, is it a go-to-market? Is it a soft landing in the US? Is it a go-to-market? Is it a pre-seed? We have a lots of seed and pre-seed with the government. And actually, we have also a lot of, let's say, companies that are doing scale up, which their first step is to work on their decks, which gives us, you were mentioning that before, gives us the opportunity to work in their business models, essentially, just by, starting with the excuse of how did you communicate? How did you talk about your business? And then we get into the business aspect.
Then you're like, what's your problem? What's your solution? What do you actually talk about? Yeah. And then that's the kind of the entry into it. And so, okay, so that's really super helpful. So you kind of run the spectrum in terms of like supporting what I always say, supporting the founder journey, which a lot of the work that I focus on is how do you start from soup to nuts to support them and the ecosystem that's really supporting them as well. And so when it comes to the government programs that you're running, would love to understand, what are they looking for? And there's a lot of what I'm seeing is US deployed programs that other countries are engaging with to help facilitate and stimulate their innovation economy. What are you seeing in terms of that market? Because even in the US, the government probably is like the number one funder of innovation. We kind of forget that. But there's so much other money here, we kind of don't think about it as much. In other countries, it's really the government that's funding innovation. Do you want to just talk me through a little bit about your experience working with governments and kind of what are they looking at? How are they selecting and what are they working on in terms of innovation?
My experience is really diverse. I work with governments that just because of mandate, they know they have to spend in innovation, but the managers are a bit behind. And so if we're able to build a relationship based on trust, then they follow our lead, right? And other governments, they have more experience and they're really investing billions of dollars in innovation. They understood that startups are going to be a great resource for their economy, to diversify their economy. Think about there are many governments. The economy, of course, is mainly driven by large corporations, but they also have to look at the longer terms, right? So they have to diversify their economy and investing into small businesses that are driving more innovations. And there are many ways of saying this one, but this is what is happening today. Startups are really driving the innovation. And so these governments are looking for opportunities, different things, I would say. So one is to support their growth stage startups in expanding, because nowadays, unfortunately, many times a local ecosystem of a country is not big enough to support a company that is growing, right? So a company needs a larger market, simply put. Thinking about also many startups in Italy that are expanding in Europe or worldwide, right? So those situations, we help the startups into the growth phase. So they're looking for this kind of value, added value. And then, of course, the network is always an easy value to provide integrated in these programs. But I would say also, I'm saying it's easy because it's not it's actually the easiest piece of, for example, Accelerator. The intrinsic work, so the coaching and understanding the businesses and supporting the founders is the real job that most times is not understood by the whoever is committing the job, right? But this is so there are also economies that they're looking at what is happening in California. Of course, Silicon Valley is huge, has a great resonance around the world. So they're looking at the way we do business here, and they're trying to import in some way, some form, the same parameters, the same mindset, the same modalities, and definitely the experience that we have here in California, in Northern California. It's great in terms of business. It's greater in the sense of there's more maturity. The market is way more mature. Everybody here is running. I mean, I've seen this one in Los Angeles happening, right? Everybody's running a startup, right? Looks like 20 years ago, everybody was writing a script. Today, everybody is putting together a pitch. So and the governments are looking at this, and they also wanna have their startup ecosystem improving by assimilating or by absorbing some of the experience that this country has, essentially.
Are you seeing in other countries a lot of kind of foundational, and I'm going to use this term in the inappropriate structure here, but in like a first principle way, in terms of like, this is core and foundational to what the country might need? I think a lot about the US, and we have consumer tech. We have a lot of widgets and consumption stuff that is highly profitable, but not that maybe uniquely intrinsically valuable. And then we have things that are happening in health tech or biotech or fintech or climate tech. And some of them have real material impacts positively in the world, and some are just also really cool. We have the Ubers, right? And so when a government's thinking about how do I bolster this ecosystem, what are they really talking about? Are they just like, we just want more activity so that we become an innovation hub, which draws more interest and young people to the city and just like builds better economy? Or are we thinking we actually have some real problems we want to solve? Like, what is the conversation really about?
When it's a little bit about everything you mentioned. There are some governments that they are aware of let's say the ecosystem is not growing, or certain the average age is declining. So they have policies and they are deploying initiatives where they are importing startups from the US or from other places, right? So it's vice versa. It's a different journey. And most, I would say that the relationships that we have, like I mentioned before, they are becoming aware of different needs, and so they are allocating resources to, like I mentioned, clean tech. Of course, everybody's talking about AI, so they want to also allocate resources towards AI, but to solve which problem, right? So everybody's kind of aware, hoping that this AI is going to be the holistic thing that is going to solve everything. But at the end of the day, we want to be a little bit more specific, right? And there are some governments that are looking into healthcare, cybersecurity, but I don't see clear mandates in specific sectors. I see that there is depending on the geography and depending on the specific problem, they may lean towards more like a vertical, like agri-tech. I hear from certain countries in Africa, or like healthcare in other countries. So there's a little bit of everything. I think that investing in innovation in a government, it's really huge job, and there are so many verticals and sectors that needs to be supported.
Right. And so you more recently, and maybe I'm speaking here because maybe you were an angel investor as well, but I know you guys added an investment fund to
Yeah.
Accelerator. And so how has that come about? And what do you guys invest in?
So it's you said recent, and I needed to think about it, because to me it sounds like old history, but was only 2021, if I'm not wrong. So in 2021, with Noble Dracon, we decided to open a fund associated to Accelerator. It was my first fund, so it was a lot of work, a lot of learning. And we raised a small amount of money, and we invested into two of our best teams in the accelerator. And that was it. In 2022, it was already done. The investment was deployed, and now we're working with these companies. Now I'm working on another two initiatives. It's very early, so it's not worth to talk about it, but it's going to be my second experience. So I hope that with this experience gained now, I would do a better job, or definitely a larger, let's say, fund to distribute among the companies. Yeah.
What has has anything surprised you as you put the investor hat on versus the founder hat, like in how you assess or think about companies, or like what has changed for you now that you're an investor?
So the first time I started dealing with investors, I actually realized that they were people. This is something that founders sometimes forget about it when they are starting this journey. They forget, okay, but these are people, you're going to deal with other people, right? Slightly different than the typical founders, but they're still people. And it's again, I was not extremely surprised. I also like to explain things very clearly. I mean, if somebody is an investor full time, or is investing seriously in innovation, in startups, it's a way to have returns. It's a business, it's a job, right? So in many cultures, just because I'm exposed to many internationals, they're still struggling with understanding what investing means, and often it's confused with a little bit of donation, which is not a favor. It's actually a deal that is going to be profitable also for the investors. So many founders don't have this clear, and even if they are clear, even if they are able to express it with words, sometimes in their act, or in their pitching, or the way they are pitching, and the way they are asking for the investment, you notice that there's something that is not really clear there. And so it's especially if you don't come from money or from the VC world, if you come from being a founder building a company, dealing with investors has always a lot of stress.
Well, yeah, once someone knows you're an investor, it's like they go into automatic pitch mode, and you're like, that's not even how that works. and actually, very rarely, right? And
at the end, we are, like I said, I didn't say they're humans by case, because at the end, among humans, we like to build relationships based on trust. So that's what we should look for, right? As a founder or investors, we like to invest in founders that we can trust, essentially, that's the foundation.
Right. What do you think? So maybe as we close out these last one or two questions here, kind of just putting on your designer hat, what do you think folks just are missing in this moment regarding the interconnection between tech and design? Where are they kind of getting it wrong, or they're missing the point?
I can answer this one. Let's see if this one is not clear, but I'm going to say it anyway. Typically, our best founders are designers.
Hmm.
What I mean by saying that, I mean that by default, somehow, because their past work, experience, not necessarily work, they embraced the iteration approach. So the
Mhm.
approach that things are going to be done by iterating on it. So they're building something. It's not doesn't have to be completely done. It's partially done. Let's see if it works. Let's see how somebody reacts. I'm not saying putting it in the market, but just do like a pilot to invite some friends, use wherever you built, and get some feedback, and then go back and improve it, right? And listen to your audience essentially. So this is something there is still unknown to the most, I would say. And there's still founders tend to still be in their garage, hid away from the audience, and that doesn't help because you don't know who you're solving the problem for,
Yeah.
essentially. So
Many,
this
many.
problem, this connection, right? These founders audience problems, it's really important.
And it's persistent. So many years ago, I was in a Techstars company called Lean Startup Machine. This is kind of when Startup Weekend was a thing and Lean Startup Machine was a thing. And Eric Ries was on the board. He wrote the book Lean Startup, and I read it. And I was working at a job, and I was like, oh, I can use this to help. I was working Teach for America. I could help teachers learn how to teach faster using iteration. From that, joined Lean Startup Machine, became a curriculum instructor. Actually, did a couple of Lean Startup Machines in Milan,
Ah,
and then became like a Lean Startup expert, with teaching and training on it. And today, I still do. I work with a bunch of different accelerators, and I do MIT, ICOR, and all the different things. And it's funny. I think like I started this about a decade ago, and so I'm like, okay, like it's a decade ago. Like no one cares about customer discovery anymore. And then I'm like, you're right. And I'm in all these rooms. I'm working with all these accelerators. I'm doing a couple of ones in Techstars and the ones in LA here, and a couple others. And it's still the conversation. The
mm,
conversation is still like, who's your customer? And I think the challenge with it is that they really don't use a scientific method when talking to customers, right? They just kind of say, I talked to 10 people or I talked to 100 people. And I'm like, but
yeah.
if you don't have the answer to the question you're trying to solve for, then it wasn't really a meaningful conversation. And walking people through kind of what I consider to be like contextual, like get the frame of what you're dealing with, like, but even like problem validation, solution validation, design validation is a pilot. Um, there's really like a science to customer discovery that people just really miss, right? That is not just like I talked to 10 people, so now I'm done, check it off the list. It's really how you build things today and be relevant to your customer in perpetuity.
Yeah, it's a science in the sense that it's a path to discover the truth. And but what is more difficult, I believe, is the process. It's really an engineeristic process. So there's a method, there's a process, and you have to be very rigid and with a certain righteousness on being really structured on the process, because if you miss that, you're losing data. Data doesn't make any sense. It's extremely difficult to get to, for example, product market fit just by running tests, unless you have a very solid structured approach.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what people kind of miss, which I think is why educational programs, I think there's a lot of like mixed conversation about like what should be free and paid, but structure, there's really a value to structured learning, which I think a lot of the paid programs for startups include, because you really do need to identify your assumptions, manage against your biases, look at the data from the responses, see which ones align with
Yeah.
you, see which ones actually don't, that you just like because you like them, and all that different stuff to work through to, okay, that's a moment of clarity. I can kind of hang my hat on that to make the next best decision that I'm going to make, and then iterate again. And it's rigorous, and people,
Yes, rigorous was the word that I was searching for, actually.
yeah,
And it's not and something I think that we should add is that it's not something that you can read on a book, unfortunately, because otherwise we would have read that book, everybody, right? Building a business would have been much easier. But it's really measuring those improvements and getting the right feedback and the right level of clarity, because each one of us is working in a different way. And this is actually the main motivation behind the coaching approach, instead of just doing lessons.
Yeah.
I really believe that coaching helps. It's first of all, it's more engaging. It's something that I like more than just teaching,
Yeah.
and it's the best of the interactivity between in the within the cohort, right? It creates really a good interactive environment. But coaching is really helping our founders into deconstructing whatever it is they're working on, understanding all the elements, clarifying all of these elements, and then you're giving them the map. You're giving back that map of
Yeah.
clarity because it's going to be their choice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong choice. If everything is clear, there is often a few choices.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? It's like taking all the noise, and sometimes I think, and having being a founder myself and having built things in the past, and you get caught up in the startup swirl, and it's like it's fail fast. It's kind of like this run to a brick wall kind of thing, and ship early, and not everyone can really do that from an expense perspective. But it's also not always I think the best founders really understand the dynamic. Like they know signal versus noise ratio. They understand like when is it time to push, when is it time to chill, and being strategic, even if they're going to run, is like an important part of that puzzle. And so I often connect with founders where I'm like, if you're so urgent right now, this is already not the right time, because you've lost the sensibility of making good judgment and good decisions, because you're in fight or flight. You're running so hard that you kind of can't take the minute. And so I think that's some of the challenges with the ecosystem, is that when you build an ecosystem, you start to build all these new players who participate with varying degrees. So you democratize access, but you also flood it with noise, right? And so it's like a new problem that shows up by having kind of all the activity, which is net good, but just a kind of a different list of hurdles to jump through, maybe.
You're actually right. Actually, Scott Hindle, which is our lead business program, often says we should be calling it Decelerator.
Really? It's like, chill out.
Yeah.
100%. It's like, chill out. And I think that's, and there's just, yeah, I think people are looking for ways to create, right? And I always tell people, like, doesn't matter what you build, you think something with your thought and you do something with your hands. We're all creators, right? Whatever you create. And I think part of that is when you realize that some of the urgency goes away, because it's like, oh, right, I always have this muscle, this ability to create something new, to create something when I need to create it, to create what I want to create. And so I don't have to run so hard at this one thing and hold it like this. I can be looser with it, right? And I can get to the same place. So with that being said, I want to just kind of close out with a final question. You had an article in a little while ago, but it was in Shout Out LA. And you said, to bring M Accelerator at this stage took a lot of work, many iterations, and a lot of learning. But as I have said before, we are at the beginning. So if this is the beginning, what's next?
So actually, it's strange, but I still feel we're at the beginning. I don't know if because we're still at the same point. No, we're not. But I don't know. It's a strange feeling. We're always at the beginning. But yeah, for the next, I would say, year, we're looking at an expansion in Europe, eventually opening our first office. And we were already planning that before COVID, then everything stopped. And now we're going back on, let's say, that plan of opening the first office in Europe. So that's going to be one of the two elements. The second element will be to open a serious VC fund that is going to, let's say, work in conjunction with an accelerator.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's wonderful. So yeah, so we'll keep an eye out for when you launch in Europe. It'd be really exciting. And if anyone watching this at any point on the podcast or on YouTube or whatnot, send any questions over. I'm happy to send them over to Alessandro as well. Thank you so much for your time today. And any closing words before we jump off?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you find it useful. I'm always really transparent. I'm always open to talk about all aspects of our business, and I'm trying to be really transparent also when we work with founders about their businesses. So, like Dominique said, feel free to reach out. I'm always excited to work with founders, with creative people, and it's always inspiring for me as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for watching Accelerator Insider, and until next time.
Bye everyone. Thank you.